We're here today to talk about what's really happening behind the scenes at our grocery stores right now, right this instant. And to do that, we are here with Jeremy Neren, GrocerKey CEO, and as I said on LinkedIn this morning, my hair and beard styling mentor. Why don't you give us a little background about you, your experience in grocery, and then specifically GrocerKey, what it is and what it does?
Absolutely. So first off, thanks for having me, guys. Looking forward to the chat today. So I've been in e-commerce grocery for about 15 years. Prior to starting GrocerKey, I ran an on-demand grocery delivery service in Madison, Wisconsin for roughly a decade. We decided to pivot and become a B2B software company. And we now license our software to roughly a dozen independent and regional grocery chains throughout the US and Canada. And one chain in particular, throughout Wisconsin and Illinois, we actually handle the fulfillment as well. So we, live and breathe the operational side of the e-commerce business every single day. And, obviously we're exposed to quite a bit given all that's going on with COVID right now as a result of that.
Yeah, so maybe we start there. So, as you just gave the overview of what GrocerKey does, explain pre-COVID, I should say. What was a day in the life like at GrocerKey, and maybe now post-COVID, how have things changed?
Yeah, so I would say actually very similar. It's just now many things have accelerated, a little added urgency. But we deal with clients that are licensing our software and operating the business themselves. In which case, it's largely around how can we support their needs in terms of just making the best use of our technology. To power, a great user experience on the front end and an efficient fulfillment experience on the back end. Really that straightforward for, our various clients that are licensing our software. And then for Woodman's, this large chain that we handle the operation for throughout Wisconsin and Illinois, we have roughly 400 staff spread across 18 of their stores. And these are GrocerKey W-2 employees that are fulfilling orders every single day. Prior to COVID, I mean, it was, close to 1,000 orders a day in some cases, and now we're surpassing that in many cases. So, pretty large order volume, and, really, our relationship, with Woodman's covers the gamut of, the same needs of the retailers that license our software, all the way to how our staff are interacting with their staff. And interfacing with, at the end of the day, their customers, because we are representing their brand when we fulfill e-commerce transactions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's an interesting dichotomy right now, too. I've been thinking a lot about that just in the marketplace right now. The relationships between doing what your customers need and then also doing what your employees need as well. And you guys sit in a unique position in there in terms of, in some ways, you almost are a default employee for some of the companies you're working with. And then you also, as you said, have your own employees that are helping with this, too. Let's start on the business side, in terms of where the software is being licensed, excuse me. What's happened? Like when all this broke, did you get a call from retailers saying, okay, we're putting a lot more resources on this? Are you seeing the business increase, and to what degree, any specific product categories? I think people are just thirsty to kind of know how all of that's transpiring in terms of, and anything you can share, I think is helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, just to simplify, the challenges with e-commerce are not all that dissimilar with the challenges in the store. I mean, the things that we're seeing across all of our retailers is you have increased out of stocks. Okay. You have to implement, max quantities on high demand items. You have increased demand, and you have labor shortages. Right. And how do you deal with all of these complexities when, volume surges 50% or maybe even 10x, which we've seen in the case of a few retailers, and you all of a sudden have 30% less labor because some staff are not, comfortable coming into work, understandably so. How do you solve for that? Right. That is kind of the root of the challenge. And again, I don't think that that's necessarily unique to e-commerce. I'm sure every retailer is experiencing similar pain in store.
What are you guys doing, Jeremy, right now? Like how are you approaching that and trying to get people or trying to find coverage? Like how have you guys approached that?
Yeah. So, it's really been trial by fire, as you can imagine. I don't think any of us saw a global pandemic coming. it's really hard to plan for it. So you figure a lot of things out on the fly. But some things that we've experimented with some level of success is spreading out our fulfillment slots over a broader time horizon.
Okay.
So that
what does that
mean? So, rather than maybe concentrating availability, at various times, spreading it out evenly throughout the day, because areas that previously were high demand, such as, I'll just use a really broad example,
Sure.
4 to 7 p.m. is going to be a high demand area for both pickup and delivery, because people previously were getting off of work.
Right.
Well, now everyone's home. Our common schedules have been totally blown up. So, and people just want to get orders in. There's such a surge in demand. People will take whatever you can get. So spreading slot capacity out more evenly across the day, we found has made it, at least the challenge, less burdensome on our staff. It doesn't solve it, but as an example of something that we've kind of experimented with on the fly with some level of success. Naturally, we're trying to hire as many people as we can from other industries, bars and restaurants being probably the best example of industries that have shut down overnight, to make up for the staff that we've lost, that we previously relied upon. We have had to ratchet back capacity to make sure we can fulfill demand in some locations. And I would say those are examples. A few other things that might come to me as the conversation comes along, but those are the things that immediately stick out to me that we've tried to do, really just to be supportive of. We kind of have to balance supporting our staff with balancing the needs of the customer.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, and I think that's probably how I'd love to approach this conversation too. Let's just have a conversation both with you and then anyone that has questions online. And again, you can submit that through the online chat in Zoom, and let's just see how we can educate ourselves based on, what you're seeing out there. A lot of questions for me, already coming off what you just said. I'm curious, are you seeing increases in order sizes too per customer than what you typically, were traditionally seeing in e-commerce? How's that playing out?
So yes and no. Out of stocks, as I mentioned, are at like an all-time high. And so what's ultimately fulfilled actually comes in a notch lower than what we were previously seeing.
Okay.
But yeah, volume is of course through the roof. So just in terms of number of orders placed, huge surge. In terms of basket size, actually slightly down, primarily as a result of out of stock.
Because of out of stocks, but had they be in stock, they'd probably be larger too. So there is a little bit
without a doubt
of the load going on.
Yeah. So I think as a consumer, behavior is now shifted into greater frequency, knowing that each order is going to have a huge amount of out of stocks.
Jeremy, we have a question from the audience. They're asking, as customers are experiencing more out of stocks, are you finding that they're trading for other things that are new to them? Like, are they going for the organic ketchup that's available versus the non-organic ketchup that they're typically used to buying, the Heinz ketchup?
For sure. I think there's definitely greater flexibility. And I mean, other categories you can imagine, things like, toilet paper. I think people will take whatever is in stock on that given day.
They're not getting picky on that one.
Yeah, the Charmin soft tissue, maybe, if that's not available, we can make a concession under these circumstances.
Makes tons of...
Just this once.
Just this once.
When did you start to, I'm curious, because there's been a lot of questions of like, when did different people start preparing for this? Ann and I were talking this morning, we saw reports that H-E-B was prepping for this as early as when things started to break in China, looking at, what were the things people were ordering over there and what impact that could have on their inventory and their out of stocks. And their out of stock rates are reportedly pretty high too, and have been seemingly getting kudos from a lot of people in the industry in terms of how they're handling this. When did you start to see people communicate, just now in general, not specific to any customers, but when did you start to see the communication really ramp up on this out of curiosity?
I would say we were, just like maybe our response as a whole, as a country, I think, as an industry, the response has been very reactive rather than proactive. And I would say, the day following Trump's kind of initial speech of, this is a real thing, we need to take it seriously. That's when we saw like an immediate surge and demand. So I think that was roughly 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, 3 weeks ago from today, right?
And it's just, it's been nonstop ever since. Yeah, actually, I think it was exactly 3 weeks ago, if I recall correctly. It was on a Wednesday evening. So starting that Thursday morning, slots started filling, from what I'm seeing across many of our retailers and, even the likes of, Amazon for that matter, for weeks in advance. It's been total mayhem ever since then.
So based on your knowledge, I'm curious in your position, seeing this all now, really close to the ground, they talk now about there's going to be, it's probably, I think they said yesterday, like the next 2 weeks are going to be, for lack of a better word, harrowing. Things are going to continue to pick up in terms of the number of cases, possibly even the number of deaths. What impact do you think that's going to have in terms of overall the food supply chain? How people continue to buy and purchase food. I know it's been a topic on our minds for some time. What's your take on how the next, say, 4 to 8 weeks transpire? What can we expect?
I would say expect the unexpected, because that's basically been the case with each passing week. I mean, there's a lot going on, in terms of, stimulus packages and, employee leave and things like that I think are going to have a pretty profound impact on labor availability, which will then have an impact on slot capacity availability within each retailer. Because ultimately you can only fulfill what's possible with, the appropriate labor resources on hand, and that affects supply chain as well. So to me, that's really where I think there's the most uncertainty. But things are so fluid that it's literally changing day by day in terms of what to expect over the next week.
And what types of things are you thinking about, or advice you give to other people to try to get ahead of that labor uncertainty specifically?
I think ultimately you have to turn on every, kind of piece of recruiting ammunition you have, and, try to recruit from other industries where, people have lost their jobs overnight and are eager to get back to work. And maybe take a position that previously wouldn't have interested them. But, in terms of what we're doing, in many ways, what these people are doing in the stores is kind of heroic. They're considered emergency workers now for a reason. People need food, and many people are not able to make it to the store, or have underlying conditions and, are at high risk if they come in store. So even a pickup can be, it can be life-changing for them. And so I think framing the position in that light, it adds deeper meaning than it would have 3 weeks ago. And there's a huge labor pool to recruit from that previously was not available as well.
How long does it take to get somebody up to speed then? Say that's coming from, I think you mentioned the bar and the restaurant industry. How long are we talking to get them up to speed on, either the picking side or, the delivery side?
Well, so, we pride ourselves on having an intuitive picking application, that someone could pick up and start using out of the gate. Naturally, you become more and more efficient over a time horizon. But in theory, we can send people to, pick orders within the same day they've started. Naturally, they're going to be less efficient. They're going to make more mistakes, but they can make an impact right out of the gate as well.
Got it.
Jeremy,
and any questions from the group?
I do. I have a question from Graham. Graham wants to know how one of your clients, Woodman's, is holding up in light of the huge increases that are happening in online grocery across their store footprint in Wisconsin. If you can comment on that.
Sure. Yeah. So, all things considered, I think they're holding up very well. I think they're actually uniquely positioned in a favorable way, given the sheer size of their stores and their back rooms. In many ways, they're always prepared to handle on or to take on a lot more order volume.
Give more background on that, Jeremy. What specifically makes a Woodsman's unique?
Yeah. So their stores are approximately 250,000 square feet. So to put that into context, it's about twice the size of a Sam's Club. And in many cases, they have back rooms that are 100,000 square feet alone. And they are, supplying, they have a very unique supply chain and distribution model where, they'll stock in many cases, 90 days or more of inventory in their back rooms and supply kind of their whole region of stores. So I think they were, again, very uniquely well positioned to take this on. But everyone obviously is experiencing some amount of challenge and pain, and they're not totally immune to that. But we are seeing some of the challenges really taper off day by day, fewer out of stocks, shelves are starting to fill in. They're able to get their feet underneath them and kind of react to this, this seemingly crazy event that we've all taken on.
Jeremy, how would you contrast that with like a larger, more like a national retailer, or what you may or may not know about that right now?
Yeah, so I mean, I would think that in many ways it would be far more challenging for retailers that have maybe handled their inventory in a more automated fashion, based on how they replenish. An event like this, I would think instinctively would not bode well for them, because they'd basically have to tear up all of their, previous practices.
Right.
Explain that more. Yeah. What do you mean there? So that if things are just algorithmic and just on automated routines from an ordering standpoint, it's not going to be able to know what to do with this just like one-time exogenous event. Is that kind of what you're
presumably saying? I mean,
okay.
I'm not, and by no means a supply chain expert. And I mean, Chris, you probably know this topic far more than me, but I would assume if you're dealing with some sort of automated replenishment system, you basically have to tear out all of your best practices previously and reform them.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I've never thought about that. I mean, yeah, it's kind of the equivalent of like, you're going to run a big Sunday circular advertisement and there's going to be this huge surge in demand, and you have to probably do some manipulation in the system to get prepared for that. Mm-hmm. And then when it happens, you've got to probably remanipulate the system so that you don't necessarily assume that's always happening too. But in this case, you've got that happening on both sides of the equation. I hadn't thought about it. That's a really good point. So that's going to take a lot of man hours then to probably look through everything that's going on and make sure that you're still prioritizing everything in the right way. So that's going to be a lot of spreadsheets and a lot of hard grunt work. Those people are probably working really hard. Man, if they're listening to this, my heart goes out to them, because that ain't easy. That's a lot of work.
Absolutely. And I would think greater dependency on, at the store level, mm-hmm. To kind of, just convey what's going on there. And, again, just tearing out the way they operated previously and operating perhaps in a more manual fashion, and needing to be somewhat reactive.
Yeah. I'm curious, what insights do you have there too? Like how, that's a great point. I hadn't thought about that too, but with the degree of out of stocks, I mean, I think H-E-B's was pushing 22%. They said Targets weren't far behind in some of the reports I was reading. For like all the activity that's happening with curbside and buy online, pick up in store, what types of complexities does that add to things? I have to think your confidence intervals for being able to provide those types of services are much less than they were before.
Yeah. So I think the biggest challenges end up being, we've talked about labor, but also, space allocation.
Okay.
When you look at the staging areas in most brick and mortar stores for e-commerce fulfillment, they're pretty small. So if they
exist, right? Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. Some retailers don't even have them. It might be a shelf at the front of the store. So,
right.
In the most extreme circumstances, you see a 5x surge in demand overnight. You're going to have to get pretty creative to be able to stage that product in a manner where, you're, complying to food safety laws, and just have enough sheer space to stage those orders until the customers come to pick them up, or until it's, sent out through a third-party delivery service.
Yeah. And then have humans, I think the other point there that you brought up too, is have humans validate whether the inventory is actually there before you even stage it. That's actually a lot more human work probably required than typically through the processes, because of just the degree of out of stocks and unpredicted volume that's happening, and
exactly
making the systems link up. Okay. On that point, across the spectrum of the retailers grocers that you work with, how many of them are still running their actual in-store operations? Like how many of them have customers actually shopping in them versus have gone strictly to a digital model versus say a curbside or pickup only model?
All of them are continuing to operate in store. Yeah. Yeah. We don't have a retailer yet that said we're just going to focus purely on digital. We have had some discuss the idea of shutting specific stores down, similar to the announcement from Kroger, to make stores that were not previously planned to be e-commerce fulfillment centers to make that move quickly. So, that gives you some context. There's definitely some emergency planning being done.
That's why I was asking, actually, because we're going to talk about that on our Fast Five this week about the Kroger pickup only store. Would you, if you had to guess right now, if you were to kind of just make a prediction, do you think you'll see more people doing that, or do you think you're going to hold? You do. Okay.
100%. I mean,
100%. Okay.
I think so. My view of what's happening now is unchanged from before. It's just everything is accelerating at a speed we never would have imagined. I was talking to an advisor of ours yesterday that said, yeah, I think he had read a report from IRI or something saying, basically everything's accelerated like 6 or 7 years in terms of how we're thinking about things in a matter of 3 weeks.
Yeah.
I mean, that makes a lot of sense to me. And we were already moving in this direction, just kind of doing it at a snail's pace. And so I think the silver lining for the industry is this kind of needed to happen. And it's unfortunate that this is the event that's pushing that. But it could be a good thing in the end, because I think it's forcing retailers to more rapidly meet consumer demands.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm actually writing that about Starbucks right now, but I think the analogy is the same. Literally right before we got on this call, but I think the analogy is the same. I think it's interesting too. That's why I always love talking to you, Jeremy, too, because we start getting this dialogue that I think for me is just inherently interesting. But like, the point I think about there is too is like going to a pickup only store. You've got the operate. You said labor is going to be a problem, right? Labor is going to be a choke point. So if you can, figure out how to keep that labor all in one spot doing the same thing, they hopefully can get more efficient. And then I got to think too, right? Like it's actually safer. It's safer for the employees.
Yeah.
Without having customers coming in there. So we talked about that in the beginning. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, and that reminds me of another angle of trying to shop overnight. So most retailers are shortening their hours. Woodman's being an example of that. They're shutting down at 10 p.m. Previously, they were open 24 hours. That does give us the opportunity to try to get out ahead of things where we can shop more efficiently now in the evening because there's no in-store customer traffic to compete with. And to your point, probably most importantly, it's more comfortable for the staff because it's decreasing their risk.
Yeah. What types of things are you doing on that front then to ameliorate the fears of your own staff, like during this period of time? And it's got to be a challenge.
Yeah. So, I mean, naturally, there's only so much you can do, but we're trying to, do things like supply gloves and, ensure that, best hygiene practices are being exercised. Common areas are being wiped down more frequently than they were previously. Everyone's trying to get a hold of masks, as are we, to be able to provide that to staff. And, measures like that I think most are trying to take, we're obviously taking very seriously as well.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Jeremy, I have another question from our audience. One Seth Werner is, are you seeing any retailers starting to pull back on support or orders from smaller firms, favoring larger, more stable firms with the idea that retailers aren't sure who will make it through the crisis and don't want to risk exposure from firms that might not be around in the next 6 months?
Interesting question. So is that, you think that that's geared towards like third-party technology providers like GrocerKey? Do we have any sense of that? How do you guys interpret that question?
Seth, feel free to clarify, but I was assuming it was more on the brand side in terms of, is it where they're taking the goods from? What products are being purchased and ordered?
Sure. So admittedly not an area I have a ton of insight on, but I can only imagine that retailers are placing more emphasis on supply chain and product availability. And so I do think that that's going to favor not necessarily larger companies, but companies that are better prepared from a supply chain perspective.
Is the category mix shifting at all, Jeremy, too? We didn't talk about this in the beginning, but are you seeing more, like, is there a decided push towards dry goods than there are, say, in the typical grocery orders as well? So even though you have an increase in, orders and volume, it's actually decidedly different than it was in the past?
For sure. Naturally, customers are trying to stock up. And so you're seeing, it's almost like flipping where we were before. It's becoming the opposite, like a move away from fresh product and more demand for, dry shelf stable goods. So folks can, kind of have a war chest of snacks at home.
Right. And that's interesting because that's actually easier to fulfill too. So then the question becomes, how does that play out over time as people get used to this? What do you see on the demographic side? I know that's a question from the chat group. Are you able to ascertain anything there? I've seen some reports now too, that generationally, this is pushing the adoption curve a lot faster. Are you able to validate any of that in terms of, say the older generations now adapting kind of these digital tools?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think in many ways, there was already a very broad cross section of customers using the service. I think people are always kind of surprised to hear that,
Yeah.
assuming that like this was only millennial driven, which is just it objectively wasn't accurate prior
Okay.
to COVID. But I do think this is accelerating demand among the higher risk demographics, which all the data suggests is 60 plus, and so the 60 plus crowd that may have been apprehensive to go digital before, and now in many cases is having to, just to look out for their own safety.
It's definitely happening. Okay.
Yeah.
Are you having to do anything else with, say, complementary services? I know HEB's created a phone line to process orders. Have you had to work on anything like of that nature at this point in time?
Definitely need to be concerned around customer service messaging. There are common threads that you start to see where you can develop, scripted responses, because you see the same thing over and over again. Why can't I get a slot in 3 days? Obviously is a pretty common question that we're seeing. So yeah, definitely having to rethink some customer service best practices and, things of that nature.
Mm-hmm. Got it. What's it been like trying to do this while we're all shelter in place? I'm curious. That's a whole added dynamic to everything that you're trying to triage that I had not thought about until just asking you this question. What complexities has that added to the last few weeks?
Quite a bit.
Okay,
and
how
we
so?
are, I mean, it's dealing with chaos in a remote manner, and kind of relying on anecdotal information in some cases, that you have to make really educated guesses on the fly. That's always challenging.
Sure.
But one of the benefits we do have of the way in which we operate is, we have several hundred staff in the stores, so that anecdotal information can be very powerful, and you can start to see common threads and areas where you need to take action pretty quickly, even in a remote context. And frankly, that's something we're kind of used to. So that,
Right.
that type of communication existed well before COVID for us. That almost a standard operating procedure for us in many ways.
Yeah, so you guys were kind of prepared for that. Yeah.
In many ways, yeah. So, and we're a remote company. We have staff across the globe, and so the work from home piece is not too big of a challenge. Look at how comfortable I am in my lazy boy right now.
You look pretty comfortable.
This isn't my first
yeah.
time doing
No,
this,
yeah. You're rocking out literally.
Jeremy, that brings up another question from Graham Thickens, who's asking, what is the biggest challenge that you guys at GrocerKey face right now in light of all of this?
It's definitely labor.
Labor.
It all comes down to labor, because we need to be very sensitive to the safety of our staff. We need to be sensitive to the fact that they're dealing with extreme demand, having to work in many cases harder than they ever have had to in the past. But that also spills over into the customer experience, because we can't fulfill more orders without more staff in current state. So I think it all boils down to the labor challenges as a result of what's going on here.
Maybe we close with that, and then we can just open the floor up to any residual questions. What is your one piece of advice to any retailer that's listening to this nationally to try to get ahead of the labor situation or possible impact that we could see? What are one, two, three things maybe you would tell them, go out and do this right now?
So I think I've read a few announcements around partnerships with large corporations from other industries. I think that's pretty brilliant. I think
are you talking like the Uber, taking Amazon, or Uber Lyft going to Amazon type of partnerships, or what examples are those, Jeremy?
Yeah, so I've seen Cisco lending a helping hand to grocers, because a lot of their staff is out of work. That's one example I've read, but I know that there's been others, partnering with local restaurants, that have shut down entirely. But have staff with, kind of the ideal skill set, more service-oriented positions, staff that are used to working, for hourly pay and, comfortable maybe taking on, more than 40 hours a week, working overtime. I think that's a huge one. And we're kind of sorting through that to the best of our ability, but we're obviously just the facilitator. But if I was a retailer, I would definitely be doing that. I think this is, probably the best time there will ever be to really double down on showing staff that you value them.
Yeah.
what better time to do that? And I think that there's real value in providing, maybe expanded bonus options, extending leave for those that are higher risk. I think that will build long-term loyalty, and frankly, it's just the right thing to do, just on a human level. And then I think managing expectations on the customer side, just making sure that if you can't fulfill demand, that it's very clear to the customer what's going on, and it could be as straightforward as just having the right messaging in place when the customer, visits the e-commerce experience.
That's an interesting point too. Like, how do you get into a transparent dialogue as your local grocer with the community, similar to how the governors do and the politicians do? Because we might need that at some point.
Yeah, just being human. And I mean, the reality is the most sophisticated supply chain oriented company in the world, Amazon, they're fumbling right now. Right. I mean, I've gone to their site the last 3 days, and you can't get a slot period for delivery, let alone 2 weeks out.
Well, yeah, to your point. Yeah, to your point, like, they can't necessarily get to the local news networks, like say, here in Minneapolis, like a Lunds or a Barley's could, where Lunds and Barley's or somebody like that could be having a very transparent conversation every day about what this is, what they can expect, try to keep the peace, stay calm. Amazon's not going to have that capability.
Yeah.
That brings. Go ahead, Jeremy.
I was just going to say, I think that's actually an opportunity for a lot of, regional and independent chains. I actually think they have a leg up on Amazon in many ways. This is the opportunity to fulfill demand and earn really, really loyal customers. Easier said than done, but if Amazon's dropping the ball in that regard, what better time to earn some customer loyalty?
Yeah, you're right. Any one of them could be the go-to grocer, establish themselves as the go-to authority at this period of time, and that'll stay with them. Yeah, it's a great point. Hopefully we'll see that. I feel like it's still slow. I think we need to get there.
Of course.
Yeah, it's only been 3 weeks, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
We have a good question from Tom Kuhn on that same vein. He says he lives in a town of about 5,000 people. They have a Walmart and a local family-owned grocery store. The Walmart doesn't have a buy online, pick up in store or curbside yet, but the local grocer quickly set up an email system for customers to submit orders they can pick up without having to go into the store. And Tom's asking how you, Jeremy and GrocerKey, are approaching the mom and pop segment beyond just digital. What are some critical ways that these smaller operations can survive and even emerge stronger after this?
Yeah, so interestingly, that's been a big point of emphasis for us this week. I mean, historically, we've been better positioned, or, I should say maybe strategically positioned to try to work with larger independents and regionals, and less so the mom and pops or, maybe the 1 to 10 store chains. Mm-hmm. But there's a surge in demand from those types of retailers. And, obviously there's a big need. So what we're trying to do is work through partners and really strip down our implementation cycle, so that we could onboard a retailer in a matter of, a week or two rather than a couple of months, so that they can really take advantage of this immediate demand. And to that end, there's actually a retailer who signed a contract with us like 48 hours ago, and their site is already stood up. And now we just need to make sure that they're prepared to start, fulfilling orders appropriately through our back-end technology and store. So that's something we never would have considered 3 weeks ago.
Wow, you guys are super busy. Holy cow.
Yeah, it truly is. It's chaos, but the implications from a business standpoint are obviously very positive for us. And, it's a time where we can be there for prospective retailers in a, extraordinary time of need. So we're trying to obviously take advantage of that and be helpful in any way we can, and trying to innovate on the fly ourselves.
How do you do that when you can't travel? So it sounds like it's good news that there's still intake on the business side too. How do you manage all that when you can't be face to face?
So I think that's largely, consistent with where we were at before.
Okay.
Most of the engagement. Yeah. A lot of what we're dealing with now is stripping down the technology implementation. So there's really no inherent benefit to us being able to hunker down in an office together. And in fact, in some ways, there might even be greater focus.
It slows it up, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Less cooler talk and more focus on what needs to get done, perhaps. We don't know for sure, but perhaps.
Right. Less activity, more accomplishment. Yeah.
Yeah.
Another listener question from Dana Rondo. She wants to know, back to transparency, what you were talking about. When you place an order for pickup on a Monday and the first available time slot is for the following Sunday, which is actually really good, Dana, I think, compared to some of the ones that I've seen and that I've talked to Zach Neren about in the past. It sounds like, how does that work behind the scenes from an inventory management standpoint, Jeremy? Are we crossing our fingers and hoping that things will be available? Or how accurate can grocers really be in that case as to how many things are going to be available and in stock in 2 weeks or a week?
Sure.
That timeline might be.
So there's multiple angles to that. One is, we as a technology company can only be as strong as the data that's provided to us by the retailer.
Mm-hmm.
And the unfortunate reality is most retailers, grocery retailers, I should say, in the US do not have real-time inventory management. So there is an element of making the best educated guess. We've been trying to solve for that industry-wide problem in a variety of ways, even prior to COVID. But I would just say that obviously the importance has only been elevated as a result of what's gone on the last 3 weeks. But we try to provide what we call proactive and reactive measures to out of stocks. Basically, on the front end, the customer can select their own preferred substitutes if the original item they ordered is not in stock, and we try to equip the customer with data such that it's very easy. It's pretty frictionless to select those subs, and then we equip that same data to the personal shoppers so that they can make good decisions on the fly without any subjectivity. So that's what we're doing to try to better assist the grocers, and I'm sure this event will kind of force grocers to be a little bit more sophisticated around their inventory management best practices.
Jeremy, I have a question for you. As you look at what's transpired over the last 3 weeks and you think about, all of the technology that's been available, you said previously, like we're accelerate where grocery should be in 6 or 7 years when this is all said and done. Seth Werner also has a question here along the same line, but he's wondering if things like takeoff technologies, out inventory tracking kind of software platforms, what does the post-COVID grocery store look like in your eyes? What are the elements that are there? What do you think grocers are really looking at now? And they're like, this has got to be in here. We need this to survive. What does that picture look like?
Yeah, so I just go back to the comment around, I think a lot of the same things are going to occur. They're just going to occur way faster. Mm-hmm. And so, I think about, there's a great inventory management company, by the name of Itasca Retail, who we've formed a little bit of a relationship with. And they've kind of been on fire over the last year, even prior to COVID. I think their growth only accelerates because they know how to handle inventory management in the context of a grocery chain. And then, I think the takeoffs of the world, Dematic, AutoStore, Fabric, all these micro fulfillment providers, they're going to see more opportunities. Mm-hmm. I've always been of the belief that it's not a black or white answer. There's going to be retailers that have to do some level of both automated micro fulfillment and in-store fulfillment. Because micro fulfillment does not make sense under any circumstances in every geography and in every store. There are environments where it inherently makes sense and environments where it inherently does not. From my perspective, I know that that's a kind of a subjective thought, but so my view is those things will absolutely accelerate, and they'll accelerate at a clip that is probably an order of magnitude greater than what we were seeing prior to 3 weeks ago.
Coming out of this, is there, like, if you were to look at, like, say, we'll use Woodman's as an example, what do you think that they'll be prioritizing, or how are they determining what the level of priority they're giving to each of those technologies are right now?
So, there is an element of speculating. I obviously don't know everything that they're doing.
Right.
I know what they're doing as it pertains to their relationship with us, but I think, all the things we're talking about will receive greater priority, just in terms of how we're handling out of stocks, what data we're equipping both the customer and the personal shopper fulfilling that order, where we're drawing the line, because it is a kind of a strategic question of to what degree do you want to rely on the customer's preferences versus just, the reality of what's on the shelf at any given time. How much do you want to rely on, kind of the knowledge of that personal shopper,
Right.
making subjective decisions. For every retailer, it's going to look a little bit different, but I think there'll just be greater emphasis on how we're dealing with in-stocks and, reacting to out of stocks.
That's good advice though. So yeah, if you're investing, the algorithmic space for inventory management software in grocery is going to be hot or hotter than it was, and probably micro fulfillment to get you more efficient in your picking and packing closer from last mile is going to still be hot too. Anything else we left off that list?
I think product attributes, better data around products, which better informs.
So product data management.
Product data management, and then personalizing that on the customer level. So the most suitable substitute for an individual customer based on their preferences and their historical, purchase history, things like that. And again, I mean, these are all things I would probably answered it the same way 3 weeks ago. I just think there's going to have to be much, much faster growth in these areas now.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. It's just it's going to accelerate X-fold. Who knows how much?
Yeah, for sure.
And any other questions? Any remaining questions from the group?
I think we've covered all the questions that we have on our side. If anyone else who joined in late has a question, you can type it in the chat box and we can ask Jeremy in the final minutes that we have here.
So Jeremy, while we're getting the final questions here, how's home life changed? How's that been different in the 3 weeks since COVID? How are you unwinding?
Yeah. So, we have 3 kids, 2 that were previously in school that are not now. And they are active and definitely making good use of each room that we have in our home. And so, but, I think we're all in the same boat. So to a certain degree, I don't think it's really changed anything. I mean, I think everyone knows it's chaotic for all of us. And so, if there's an occasional baby crying in the background or a kid runs into middle of a conference call, you get them integrated the best you can into that call, and you roll on from there.
Yeah, mine just screamed in the background right as you said that. So I don't know if everyone could hear that, but they did. So that's awesome.
We have one last question from Dana Rondo. She wants to know if digital orders are originating more from apps or web-based orders.
Yeah, so we've historically seen roughly a 50-50 split on that. And I haven't noticed any major change as a result of COVID on that front. And that might speak more to, just kind of the specifics of the ordering experience within grocery, where you have people, placing, orders with 30 to 50 items. So desktop being, kind of a suitable solution, regardless of whether you're at work or at home.
That's great.
That makes a ton of sense.
Jeremy, I have one more question for you, because I've already done this with your brother, Zach. But if we have people that are on the line right now who know somebody that's looking for a position or that might be suited for one of these positions in one of the stores that you guys are working with, where should they look? If they don't have a partnership, if you haven't established a partnership or the grocer hasn't established a partnership, where's a good spot to be looking for open opportunities that GrocerKey might have?
Well, I mean, it could be as simple as sending an email to us directly, contact@grocerkey.com, offhand, with, the region you're in and, any relevant information you would typically submit for an open job position.
Awesome. Great. I think that's all that we have.
Awesome.
Thank you guys so much for having me. This was fun.
Yeah, thanks so much for being here again. For everyone listening and for everyone that hopefully will be viewing this later. Again, this is Jeremy Neren, the CEO of GrocerKey, and we were talking about basically what's all transpired in the grocery business over the last 3 weeks. On behalf of Ann, on behalf of Jeremy, on behalf of everyone in the audience too, we say it every week. It's never more important than it is right now. Be careful out there.
Jeremy, we have one more question that came in that I'd be remiss if I didn't ask. Seth Werner wants to know, given what you know about what is out of stock, if someone were a food entrepreneur, what product would you start making now? I love this question.
Oh man, that's a really good one.
Yeah.
I mean, the obvious one, which I guess has already been done and maybe is for that reason a bad answer, is, hand sanitizer.
Okay.
There's all kinds of companies that have shifted gears into starting to manufacture hand sanitizer. Yeah, I mean, it's so obvious, but if it's not that, probably toilet paper.
Yeah, that they did that is a qualifier. They said not toilet paper, etc.
They said not toilet paper.
Like,
I missed that.
is it
Okay.
cauliflower crust pizza or any other like CPG item?
I'll tell you one I've picked up, and I guess I'm not really answering the question here, but like rice alternatives, because that's another thing. Like people are stocking up on all these big bags of rice, worried that they're not going to have food a month from now. So I started eating right rice, which is like an alternative that's actually really delicious.
Sorry, what?
It's called right rice. I was not paid by them either.
What exactly is in right rice?
There's a lot of potential dangerous areas with that name, but that's okay.
I'm going to have to get back to you on the ingredients, but it's considered like a lower carb, healthier version of rice, but it's actually really delicious.
Is it?
Yeah. So if you are the CEO of Right Rice, please reach out to me and cut me my check that I'm rightfully owed for this promo. It's actually really good. Yeah. So anyhow, I don't think I answered that question at all, but maybe something that's like very shelf stable. That could be, you could sell in bulk. That would allow someone to, ensure that they have, a month's worth of food in the basement along the lines of rice.
Now we're getting into like the like blooper clips reel for the last couple minutes that we have, but
it's starting to feel that way.
Yeah. Dylan Mueller wants to know, do you recommend everyone just begin intermittent fasting due to the inventory concerns with food?
Oh, Dylan, come on. My stance on that one. Absolutely.
Green drink, just green drink for everybody. Are you getting your green drink?
Yes, I'm doing my daily athletic greens, and I'm still doing my 18 to 20 hours of intermittent fasting.
Love it.
So that is being maintained throughout this COVID experience.
Good for you, man. Yeah. I do have one thing on the toilet paper thing that I got to bring up for Seth is like, why is toilet paper the shape and size that it is? Just think about that for a second.
Wow.
Has anyone ever thought about that?
Why is Jeremy supposed to have knowledge on this?
I don't know. Well, he's talking about different types of rice. Well, let's iterate on toilet paper. When was the last time somebody iterated on that?
This is very Seinfeld-esque, and that's a good thing.
Exactly. People can pretty much drop off at this point with the George Costanza game. Tom Coon says.
That might have been a mic drop. Yeah, that might have been a mic dropper.
Awesome. Well,
is this something? No, I have to ask though, Chris. Is this something you're genuinely intrigued by?
No, I genuinely thought about that 3 days ago, and then you just started talking about that, and I was like, yeah, like, why is this? Because and the reason it came up was, I don't know if you saw that video where the guy did like, you need this many squares for the average thing, and like, so then I was like, well, do you like, why can't it be wider? Why can't it be longer? Like, how does that work? Like, I don't understand why the roll is the roll, other than that every house in the world is designed that way.
This is starting to feel like an Ali G business pitch.
Yeah.
For those that have not seen that, look that one up right when we hang up here.
Exactly. It's funny. Renee's laughing too.
Yes.
But hey, for everyone on, thanks so much for being with us. We could probably keep rolling on this all day.
Was that a pun?
And it's
so obviously
not intentionally.
Bad dad joke.
Oh man.
All right. Well, we'll wipe the slate clean, and we'll start again next week. And hopefully, we're gonna actually try to experiment with this with the Fast Five too at some point. So hopefully, this was our first foray into Zoom. So thanks for sticking with us. Ann and I are just kind of learning the intricacies of it all. Jeremy, thanks for being
thanks for having me.
Supporter of us too, trying to do that. We appreciate that. And hopefully we'll continue to bring you guys as much good content as we can.
And if you guys have any questions or follow up after this, info@thirdhaus.com, and we'll get your questions answered. Thanks again, guys.
Thanks. Super helpful, Jeremy. Learned a lot.
Yeah. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.